So one of the things that I'd like to always start off with is clear objectives, if possible. So one is I want you guys to understand the systems involved, and for me, the systems are the websites, the places you have to go in order to get counted, the basic nuts and bolts of selling to the federal government. Next, I want you to understand the support that's available to you, so where you can go for more information. Winnie is one of those wonderful resources. Do you guys have a card? If not, I'm sure you have one. Okay, so remember Sherwood card. Because the Small Business Development Centers are partially funded by this SBA and then also the state of New York to help people through this process of selling to the federal government, but also starting and growing your business more generally. And there are other kinds of support that I'll be mentioning later on through the program. I'd also like you to understand how to increase your likelihood of getting contracts, like by understanding things that small businesses tend to have troubles with, so the common mistakes that you can avoid if you know that you can see them coming. So the first thing you have to do is you need a DUNS number. A DUNS number is a unique identifier for your small business. It is not your social security number, it is not your taxpayer ID, it is a separate unique identifier, and that's where we're going to attach past performance. That's also where your business credit will be associated with. Because let's say Smith Consulting, I'm sure exists in every state. You need a DUNS number to help set businesses apart from one another. Getting a DUNS number is free, but the Dun & Bradstreet Corporation does indeed sell other services. So you get your DUNS number for free, but you might be solicited to purchase other kinds of credit monitoring or other kinds of business support services. So once you have your DUNS number, you set your business up legally, and you're ready to go, the next thing you're going to want to do is register. Registration is basically going to sam.gov and providing the details about your business. SAM functions as the backbone of federal contracting, sort of like a white pages. So there you're going to make representations about your business, name, contact information, what you do, your industry codes, all that good stuff goes into SAM. SAM then feeds other government systems with that same data. Now, if you have a SAM entry and you forget your password, you need to go back and sort of rescue that by going through the help desk process. The reason I say that is they won't allow two different entities to register with the same DUNS number. So you just want to make sure you keep that information handy. You're also going to need to update it at least annually because your profile will time out. The other thing to keep in mind with SAM is that it is free. So once you put your information into SAM, it's good information because that's the contact information you're giving the government. You will invariably be solicited by private entities that are hoping to sell you their government contracting services. If you get an email asking you to pay money, it didn't come from the government. We also don't call you and ask you for your private information. Some entities that will contact you are legitimate, some may not be, so just keep that in mind. And many of them will have federal acquisition, USA, America, Pro, Gov in their title somewhere, but that doesn't mean that they are indeed legitimate. In the presentation, you'll see sometimes you'll see small bullet points, like and maybe parenthetical little asides. That's just sometimes to tell you the date on which something changed, or to indicate that some data in this presentation is going to be different from data you see elsewhere. So one mention of that is that SAM replaces CCR and ORCA. If you were to go online and type in selling to the federal government and looked at the PowerPoint presentations you saw that popped up, some of them would have CCR or ORCA mentioned. All that means is that it's an older presentation. Many times you don't see the date on which these things were updated or uploaded. So just keep in mind that you see some of these older systems that you're reading an older presentation, and some of the information included in those presentations might be out of date by the time that you read it. So I mentioned in SAM that you're making representations about your business. You're saying who you are, what you do. But you're also going to be mentioning whether or not you currently hold any particular certifications. You don't need to be certified to sell to the federal government, because certifications are really just for small businesses. The federal government obviously buys from large businesses, it buys from international corporations, it buys from nonprofits, it buys from all kinds of different kinds of entities. But if you are a small business, you might want to consider some of these certifications. Now, in general, this
just a quick question on that. So, service disabled veteran.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say you have a company that's 100% yours,
mm-hmm.
and then you have percent ownership of two other companies, let's say 20% mm-hmm. across the board. Would those businesses be able to be qualified on the service disabled or does it have to be 100%?
It has to be 51%.
51%.
51%. So in all of these certifications, well, whether in all of the self-certifications, if certifications relies on who you are, then the person on whom eligibility rests has to own 51% of the business unconditionally and directly. So what I mean by that is, for woman-owned small business, the woman on whom eligibility rests has to own 51%. Now, if the woman-owned business is owned by 3 women and they each own 33% of the business, that's still fine because women still, assuming that all of the other criteria are met, women still own 51%.
It doesn't have to reside in just one.
No, it doesn't have to reside.
As long as the total control.
Right, exactly. The person on whom eligibility rests.
So if there are 2 other individuals, 20%, 20% total, until 60% altogether, service disabled, then it's service.
Yeah, then it would count as service disabled, assuming that they meet all of the other criteria. So for instance, none of them has been debarred from federal work. They're all U.S. citizens, not necessarily residents, that kind of thing. But that's important to know. Now, there are 2 different types of certifications at the federal level. One is self-certification and the other is formal certifications. Now, self-certifications basically are what it sounds like. You've gone to the website, the SBA.gov website, looked at the certification, read the eligibility criteria, and determined that you indeed meet those specifications. And then you go to SAM and you can essentially check a box to say, I am a small disadvantaged business owner or woman-owned small business, etc. as a self-certification. And I'll go into what these individual certifications are in a little bit, but I want to make clear the advantage to being a certified business. So I mentioned that the federal government buys from all different kinds of entities, large, small, here, there, everywhere. When a contracting officer goes out to buy goods or services, he or she has the option to go, and there are guidelines about when they should use these vehicles, but essentially they can go full and open competition, which means they're going to buy from whoever has the right price or the right product mix. They can choose to set it aside for small businesses, which means they're only interested in entertaining offers from small businesses. Certified businesses, maybe say woman-owned or hub-zoned or just service-disabled veteran, or any combination of the above. So the more certifications you're eligible for, the more certifications you should sign up for, because it gives you more buckets in which to play. So that's essentially the benefit of a self-certification. Formal certifications come with additional benefits. So I'll just go through the self-certifications to make sure that you know what they are. But small business is based on your industry. So generally speaking, it's either based on the the dollar value of revenue you had on average for the past 3 years, or the number of employees you have. If you're making things, like you're manufacturing somehow, it's probably going to be based on the number of employees. If it's another kind of business other than manufacturing, it's typically the dollar value of revenue that you have. You can find out what your individual standard is by looking at your North American Industry Classification Codes, which is the NAICS codes up there. When I send you this presentation, I'll also send you an email that goes along with it that will have a link to where you can go to look up your industry codes. You can type in the keywords and see what the standards are. Women-owned business and veteran-owned business means at least 51% owned by either of those 2 groups. Same thing with service-disabled veteran. Small disadvantaged business means you're a small business owned by somebody who is socially and economically disadvantaged. Social disadvantage is presumed if you're African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, Native American, Native Hawaiian. I always miss one group, I can't remember what it is. But essentially, it's the closest we have to minority-owned small business certification in the federal government. There's no specific minority certification. So you must be socially disadvantaged and economically disadvantaged. Economic disadvantage means that your net worth at the time you apply is usually under, for this one, $750,000. So that's the self-certifications. Formal certifications are a little bit different. That's where you're putting together a package, you're mailing it off to the SBA, and the SBA is determining whether or not you qualify. So the 2 we have at the federal level are 8A and hub zone. Now, one thing to note is that the city, state, MTA, Port Authority, all the levels of government and quasi-governmental organizations have their own way of certifying people. So they may have slightly different standards for each one of these buckets. And one thing to note is that the city and state of New York don't necessarily require citizenship for these certifications, whereas the federal government does. So just make sure if you're interested that you go back and double check with the right level of government to make sure you meet their level of certification. And don't assume that just because you didn't meet the standard for one level that you don't meet the standard for any of them. But back to 8A and Hub Zone. So these are the ones that require formal certification. So 8A is for folks who are socially and economically disadvantaged. So they have to be an SDV, but then they provide additional information that puts them into this bracket of firms that are in a 9-year business development program. So, and then Hub Zone firms are those in historically underutilized business zones, which are areas on the map that are actually concrete physical areas that have had higher than average unemployment and higher than average poverty rates. And then there's some magic statistically over the census. They tell us who's in a Hub Zone. Your primary office has to be in a Hub Zone, and 35% of your employees have to live in any Hub Zone. So you could be in a Hub Zone in Queens, and you count as a Hub Zone employee for purposes of this. So your primary office is in a Hub Zone in Queens. Your employees could be in Hub Zones in Harlem, Atlanta, Alaska, wherever. Even though for you and I might think we know where a Hub Zone might be, the map might tell a different story. So definitely go back, check on the map to see if you're in the Hub Zone. Times Square is a Hub Zone. Right. So it's something you just have to double check, because I was recently on the Hub Zone map trying to see where Hub Zones were in New York. And there's some areas in Midtown West that are like 36th and 8th-ish about is a Hub Zone. So you want to make sure you're double checking these things.
And where do we find the map?
I would recommend just Googling Hub Zone map and going to the SBA link. If you try to navigate through the SBA website, it'll take you longer than doing it that way. And literally type in the address, not the address across the street, not down the block, because it's like a zip code, and then you can be across the street from Hub Zone and not be in it. Okay? Generally speaking, it'll map onto where you think a Hub Zone should be, but the actual boundaries might be slightly different. And there might be these individual pockets that are 2 blocks by 2 blocks that are also Hub Zones for some reason. And that they're near 26 Federal Plaza, there is a 3-block by like 2-block triangle that's a Hub Zone across the street. So I'll go to the formal certifications now just to make sure you understand them. 8A is a 9-year program, and the main benefit for our program is the ability to sole source a contract. So sole sourcing basically means that instead of putting work out to bid, like I described earlier, a contracting officer can elect to do business with you exclusively. They can say, I want to buy $30,000 worth of chairs. I know you sell chairs, you sold chairs to my office before. Can you give me a price? That direct relationship is only allowed because you're in this particular kind of program that allows you to sole sourcing capability. But in order for a contracting officer or an agency to feel comfortable doing that, they have to know that you're still a good use of agency resources and that you are indeed not a crook. So what they'll do is that they trust that the SBA has gone through the paperwork to determine those things. So in order to get into the program, you have to submit more paperwork than you probably ever want to see. But if you're really getting into your business financials and your personal finances to make sure you are who you say you are, you do what you say you're going to be able to do, and that your business is in a sound enough financial condition for you to be able to take on government contracts in your industry. So, to get into the ADA program, you're going to be submitting things like 3 years of your personal financials, 3 years of your business taxes, and your personal financials, personal business financials, personal taxes, business taxes, and also that same information for anybody who owns more than 10% of your business, their spouse, and your spouse, and proof of all of the accounts you have, all currency and stuff. We're going to fingerprint you, make sure that the FBI is looking for you, all kinds of things. And then every year you're going to submit more documentation so that we know where your business is year on year. But that's one sufficient of all this documentation, as opposed to trying to submit it every time you want to go out to bid on it. So that's 8A, and it's 9 years, which means that you have a 9-year and your business has that same 9 years. So in year 8, you couldn't start another business and then try to send it through the 8A program. In year 8, that business could replace you and put in your brother as the leader of the company and try to bring you for another 9 years. The other thing to note is that your award must be at fair market value. So let's say you're selling $30,000 worth of chairs. That has to be $30,000 worth of chairs. You can't then provide, you can't mark things up 6 times and think that because the government is working with you exclusively, they have an obligation to be working the same. It has to be fair market. And then the first and last bullet points there apply to all purchases, and the FAR reference are just references to the fact that each one of these programs is governed by federal acquisition regulations. The federal acquisition regulations and co-federal regulations outline when certain programs kick in, where the authority of the contracting officer lies, so on and so forth. So the governing section of the FAR that relates to 8A is FAR 19. And applies to all purchases means that it doesn't matter how much the dollar value of that acquisition is. We can use the 8A authority to buy one paperclip or to buy construction services on a hospital. Generally speaking, acquisitions have different rules that apply to them depending on the dollar value of the acquisition. So 8A main benefit is the fact that you're in this program, there's a little bit more support for you, and there's a sole source ability. For Hub Zone, however, it only applies to purchases over $3,000. So we wouldn't be able to buy one paperclip with the Hub Zone program. Again, it's certified by the SBA because we want to make sure that someone says they're in a historically underutilized business zone. They are indeed in a historically underutilized business zone. And if they say they're employing people, we need someone to check those pay stubs to make sure that these people actually live in Hub Zones. You submit the paperwork once at the beginning, and then every 3 years you go back and submit similar paperwork to make sure that you are still in a Hub Zone, your employees are Hub Zone employees, etc. The other reason for that recertification every 3 years is that the underlying census information will change. You know, everyone knows what Williamsburg is like compared to what Williamsburg was like a few years ago. So when a neighborhood changes, in theory, it may not be a Hub Zone. And Hub Zones are also tend to overlay other programs at the state and the local levels because every level of government has a vested interest in making sure underutilized areas start seeing more investment and more job creation and more job growth. So let's say these programs work. You might get a letter in the mail that says from the SBA saying this location, your address, is no longer a Hub Zone, is no longer a Hub Zone eligible. You'll have 3 years or something like that before your Hub Zone will expire. And then you can either move to another Hub Zone location, or you can choose to let that Hub Zone certification expire. But it won't be treated as any slight against you. It's just that the neighborhood got better. That's the point of these programs. The idea is that we should work with some in those particular locations. There's a competitive aspect to this, which means that a contracting officer can elect to set work aside for Hub Zones firms, so they can say, I only want those $30,000 of chairs to be provided by a Hub Zone firm. Or they can sole source. If they believe that there's only one Hub Zone firm that sells chairs that can deliver to them, they can sole source it to them. The other benefit to the Hub Zone program is a 10% price valuation preference, which basically means that if, let's say the acquisition is not set aside, and it's a full and open competition, so your competitors can be anybody. If you've been on work here, the next lowest bidder is less than 10% lower than you are, you're evaluated as having submitted the same price bid. So that 10% can be helpful, especially if your competitors have lower cost structure or lower. So I mentioned your principal office has to be in a Hub Zone. 35% of your employees have to be in any Hub Zone in the United States, so not necessarily just the Hub Zone you're in. And the governing body regulation is FAR 19.13. I don't expect that you will go back and read the federal acquisition regulations. But what I do want you to know is that whenever someone is talking to you about selling to any level of the government, they should be able to provide you information for where you can go to get more information on your own. Because the programs do change, the laws change. Sometimes people can be mistaken, like especially if they're not, especially if they don't work for the government or whatever level of government they're talking about. Sometimes they can, mix apples and oranges by accident. So one way to make sure you're getting the proper information is that the person gives you citations to go back and look at it yourself. The other way is to make sure you're listening to somebody who's employed by the level of government you're speaking about. Because just by virtue of being an SBA employee, I have to be more up to date on federal changes. I don't necessarily know when things change at the city or state levels. So for the ladies in the audience, Women-Owned Small Business Program has two portions: economically disadvantaged women-owned small business, women-owned small business in general. There are no sole source opportunities as of right now for women-owned small businesses, although that is likely to change. There are also no limits for the set aside. So before, you could only set aside work up to $4 million essentially for a women-owned small business. Now, if we wanted to set aside the acquisition of an aircraft carrier, we could do that. The contracting officer could do that. But one thing to note is that not all industries are eligible. This is for industries in which women are statistically underrepresented. So if you wanted to take a look on our website, on the Women-Owned Small Business Program, there is a compliance guide that has a list of the industries. But essentially, they're in manufacturing and construction, electrical engineering, that kind of thing. If you do some certain kinds of services, like media, like this young lady here, that wouldn't be eligible. Veterans-owned small business, so it would be the VA who determines your service eligibility and whether or not you're a veteran. The SBA will just go with whatever the governing body says. There are goals so when a large prime contractor gets an acquisition that's over $150,000, they are required to subcontract out work. And one of the reasons in which they're required to subcontract out work is veteran-owned small business. Okay. Also, you stay a veteran-owned small business as long as you stay a veteran. So there are no term limits. Again, FAR 19.14, and this applies only to acquisitions over $3,000. I mentioned before you should know that the governing body of law exists out there, but it's important because it means that there is a correct answer for every question you have about acquisition. It's written out there someplace in some body law, policy, or directive. So if you're not sure what something means, if you're not sure how your rights will be adjudicated in a particular instance, you should reach out to people like Winnie, or to the Small Business Administration, or to the agency you're dealing with, because someone will be able to give you a citation. Granted, maybe not in that exact minute, maybe they'll have to look it up themselves, but they can tell you where to go to find more information. Okay, and the FAR outlines not just your responsibilities, but also your rights as a potential bidder on work or an awardee. So I've been talking about mostly, and I will continue to talk about mostly, prime contract opportunities. That's where your contractual relationship is with the government. If you're a subcontractor, your relationship is with the person who has a relationship with the government. Now, the best way to figure out if you should be a prime or a subcontractor is to really look at your own business and see what your resources are and what the realities are of the acquisition environment you're playing in. If you want to know if the government buys what you have to sell, you should look at past acquisition behavior. Honestly, the best predictor of whether or not the government is going to buy something is whether or not the government has purchased it before. So you can find past acquisitions over $25,000 at Federal Procurement Data Systems, and that's the first website on the page there. And that's useful because not only will you can do keyword search, you can search by industry code, but you can also find out what agencies are purchasing those items, what bureau or department within that agency was purchasing it. So let's say it was the Department of Treasury, like the IRS, or it was a Bureau of Engraving, where the place of performance was. So even if the person who signed the contract is in Washington, D.C., were they buying in D.C. for Arizona? That's how, if you're realizing that what you sell is only purchased out of the D.C. office, that's where your selling and your marketing has to happen, and your networking, even if the place of performance is actually in Arizona. You can also find out who won, which is helpful because you can find out who the larger primes are in your space. Maybe they're local. Maybe they're people with whom you have a relationship or can develop a relationship. But it's good to know who's winning and how much they're winning. That can also be helpful as you're trying to develop partnerships with other small businesses or large businesses, or when you start getting inquiries from people who want to sell you their consulting services. You can go back and find out. I just asked them if they won anything in the past. And you can actually go back and double check to see if that company did indeed win what these people say they did. I say this all the time. People try to mislead me all the time about the nature of their contracts or how much the dollar value was or whether or not they actually won something. And then I'll go back and I'll politely screenshot it and send them back and say the record says something else. If people mislead me or try to mislead me, knowing I'm sitting at a computer at the time that they're calling me, and I could, in theory, just go look it up myself, probably some people might try to mislead you. So just make sure that you're double checking information because it's free to double check it. Doing that due diligence can save you some heartache, maybe, and it gives you a little bit more background information to work with. So that's past buying actions. You can find current buying actions on the FedBizOps site, which is fbo.gov, Federal Business Opportunities. And that's other buying opportunities over $25,000 that are open today. That's where a contracting officer is saying, I want to buy this now, or I want to buy this in the next 60 days or next 90 days. And even if you're not ready to bid now, it makes sense to go look at those opportunities so that you can see what the government's asking for, what language they're using, what documentation they're looking for, how they're writing these acquisitions, and whether or not this is something you could do as a prime contractor on your own. You might find that when you look at opportunities in that space, they're never procuring just that service alone. And an example of that would be, you might find, let's say you provide textbooks and a particular kind of computer software. You might find that the agencies are never buying those textbooks alone. They're always buying those textbooks with in-class trainings. So if you want to sell them those textbooks, you've got to go out there and find a trainer, because that's how the acquisitions are being written. Or you might find that we don't buy what you have to sell alone. If you sell a soap, the kind of soap that's in a dispenser in a restroom, you might find that it's almost never procured by itself. It's always part of a janitorial contract. Well, if that's the case, then you need to be selling to janitorial services, not necessarily spending time trying to sell to the government, because maybe we're just never buying that thing as a standalone product or service. Or maybe another example is, like, if you're marketing or outreach, you might find out that for all of the outreach activities that the government is doing, there's a significant component that requires translation services. And so you need to find a translator if you ever hope to acquire those kinds of contracts. So looking at the opportunities before you're even ready to bid can be helpful, because you at least know what to expect. Because when government buys the second or the third or fourth or 17th version of that same thing, they're going to be cutting and pasting from old acquisitions. That's how they create the new ones. They look at what they did before. Okay, so I'm just providing some screenshots of what FBO, FedBizOps, and FPDS look like. The reason I include these is that there are a lot of lookalike, sound-alike websites out there. Our website's all end in .gov. You can't get a .gov email address, .gov domain name unless you're actually a government entity. But it just works well to know people. And again, when you put your information into SAM, people will be searching it. They will start getting emails, and it's good to know that it's coming. If you're interested in subcontracting, you might want to look into the directory of large prime contractors. Because remember I said sometimes you go to FBO and FPDS and realize that what you sell is never purchased alone, or rarely purchased alone, or never purchased alone in New York. And that's what you need to do. The Directory of Large Prime Contractors can help you by providing a space to go to look for large primes who are looking for small businesses. Now the tricky thing though is, in order for a prime to have won an award, they needed to know who their pricing, who they had on their staff. They needed to have a good sense of how they were going to do work, because that's how they won the contract. So if you see the Directory of Large Prime Contractors and you reach out to them and they tell you they already have their team set up, don't be dismayed. Think of it as an opportunity to get on their team for the next time around. Sometimes there'll be opportunities because maybe a prime contractor is no longer doing business with that prime, or maybe they're busy, or maybe they fell out or something, and they do indeed need someone to join their team for this acquisition. So this is a long-term business development strategy. Also, prime contractors are prime contractors in part because they're good at what they do. And so they're good at picking teams, and they work with people that they know and that they trust. So you're going to need to develop that kind of rapport in order for them to want to work with you on contracts. Because when a prime contractor signs the dotted line, they are responsible for the outcome of that work or those services. So if they pick a subcontractor, they've got to have some confidence that they'll actually get done what it is they say they're going to do. And you can find primes in Directory of Large Prime Contractors. You can use FPDS to find people who have won acquisitions. You can also go search yourself in SAM. People search for you, you can search for them. Go in there and search by industry, keyword, etc. to get a sense of who the players are in your industry. And definitely use FPDS instead, because it's good information, because it's information that's coming directly out of the government acquisitions. This is what subnet looks like. It's ugly. Generally speaking, if the website looks too clean and too neat and too easy to understand, it's not us. So this is where you'd be clicking for the subcontracting opportunities directory. I mentioned this just, I'm not sure if this is relevant to the audience here today, but if you sell something that can be purchased at Walmart, Target, Staples, anything, Home Depot, anything that comes off the shelf, anything that can be purchased in small, medium, large, sort of standardized products, you might want to consider GSA schedules. So that's desks, furniture, computers, etc. The reason I say that is it is not worthwhile for each individual agency to go out there and individually try to buy staplers. Because what's going to happen is they're going to all spend all this homework spend all this time doing homework that could be standardized. GSA schedules functions a lot like Amazon to the federal buyer. GSA is the middleman. They work with the sellers, figure out if they are who they say they are, if they can deliver what they say they can deliver, if their standards are up to par. They work with the vendors on pricing, and then they allow you to upload an inventory to GSA schedules. That makes it easier for a buyer from any government agency to go in and purchase, knowing that they don't have to do much more background homework on you because GSA is already done. So if you sell uniforms or AV equipment, anything like that, that you typically purchase at Walmart, Staples, that kind of thing, you might want to look at GSA schedules. It also has pricing for certain standardized services, so graphic design, maybe pest control would probably be on GSA schedules. And it's a good place to go to see what your competitors are charging the government. It's not a black box, it's literally a catalog. You go in there and start to search as though you were a buyer. I recommend it. Just go in there and see, because if you realize that your competitors are selling your same product, but they're selling it much cheaper because maybe they're the original manufacturer, that tells you that you're not going to be able to compete on price. Maybe you need to provide something else. So when let's say you sell computers and Dell is on GSA schedules. I have no idea if they are, I'm just assuming that they are because it would be silly for them not to be. You can't compete on laptop prices against Dell, but maybe their minimum order quantity is much higher than your minimum is. Maybe they won't do any of the networking. Maybe they don't provide any, IT support following that up. Well, let's say, and this does happen, in furniture, the original manufacturer of furniture will often be on GSA schedules with their products. Well, maybe they're, again, minimum order quantity, maybe delivery terms aren't as advantageous. Maybe they won't sell just one chair. Maybe they don't provide any interior design services. So it's not so much just the price. You also have to think about what the buyer might need that the catalog won't provide for them. It might seem intimidating, but remember, if you're selling in the private sector, you won't ever have that much information about who else is selling to your customers. So, take it with a grain of salt. At least you know. And even though it functions like Amazon for the federal buyer, and even though they're technically called contracts, you're not guaranteed a minimum order quantity at all. It's just a place where you can go with your materials. You still have to market your business and make sure that the buyers know about you. So another way you might want to sell other than prime contracting, subcontracting, and being on GSA schedules is to investigate either teaming or a joint venture. Teaming is usually a more informal linkage between two businesses. Joint ventures usually require the creation of a separate legal entity. And you can imagine in certain kinds of industries that makes a lot of sense, like construction or anything where there's a lot of liability because insurance and bonding and workman's comp need to be associated with a particular legal entity. The 3 bullet points here just describe some of the legal framework for joint ventures and teaming arrangements. One is that you're excluded from affiliation. That just means that if 2 small businesses get together for the purpose of joining a venture to go after a piece of government work, they don't all of a sudden become one large business. You're not penalized for that. 2 small businesses don't become one big business just because you're going after a contract. There are 2 different types of requirements that tend to lead to this. One is bundle requirement, which people tend to understand. It's when 2 things that seem to be completely different are being purchased together on the same contract. An example of that would be security and transportation services for VIPs. Security and transportation are 2 separate services. However, they have to work well together in order for those VIPs to get from point A to point B safely. The contracting officer will procure those 2 things together in the same contract because they're not going to play referee if those 2 entities don't get along. So if your walkie-talkies don't work together, or if there are blind spots in the way that the person is being transported, that could happen very easily if the contracting officer themselves are picking the two entities. But if those two items were procured on the same contract, those two entities would have had to figure out how to work together and guarantee that they're going to work together before they could make a contract. So that's also the same thing with like the textbooks and training. Do the trainers believe that the right materials in the textbooks, and how does that work out? Contracting officer doesn't want to make those things work. It's the same, and also if it's the kind of acquisition where things are automatically baked into the acquisition, like general construction. Nobody's a plumber / electrician / mason / whatever. If you're going to build a building, you're going to get one general contractor, and he or she will then pick the person to put in the windows and the flooring, etc. So those kinds of bundled requirements make sense. It makes it so that the contracting officer doesn't have to then negotiate terms with everybody else. Other than a bundled requirement might be where some other service is required in order to get to where you need to be. So in real life, after Hurricane Sandy, we had some 8A firms that did environmental remediation or other kinds of disaster-related work. They were good at what they did. But after Hurricane Sandy, transportation was compromised, communication was compromised. They needed to get able-bodied people from wherever they were in the area to the sites that needed to be cleaned up. That might be something that might require a short-term staffing company, because they might know where to find those folks. It may be, if there's a particularly difficult acquisition that's in a cost-plus environment, you might need someone special to handle the accounting, because without making sure that your accounting systems work, you won't ever win that contract. So there are ways that small businesses might come together to create the solution that the government wants. But again, just because you're two together does not make you one big business. Now, none of this works if you can't get the money or you can't find a contract. So you want it to make sure you go to that biz ops. But at the same time, you have to understand that these are still relationship-driven businesses. Contracting officers put things out to bid as long as they're over $25,000 and as long as they're not being sole sourced. But under $25,000, they have a lot of leeway as to how they buy something, and that's subject to each individual agency. So you want to present your capabilities and your material directly to people who can influence acquisition. That's going to be the contracting officers, because they're the ones who sign the contracts. The agency small business representative, or there's usually some title with including the term small business at every agency. It might be an ODSTABU, which is the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization, or some other title, but small business will always be their title. They can influence acquisitions by helping to point you in the direction of where the agency is looking to fill the slots with small businesses like yours. And then if you're in an overly technical space, as shown here, you might be wanting to look for the person who is going to influence the technical writing portion of it. So that might be, let's say you're going to overhaul IT at a particular agency, the CIO or CTO would be really important, because that person is going to write the specs for what that acquisition will look like. So you're going to find those people at procurement conferences, business expos, events labeled supplier diversity, or selling to the government, that kind of thing. There's business matchmakers. If you're in a really technical field, you also want to keep aware of industry days or technical days in your wheelhouse. So like, let's say you're in real estate development, there's a real estate conference, you might want to make sure that anyone from the government may be there and know who they are. You're also going to want to just make sure you're on the mailing list of small business development centers and the SBA, procurement technical assistance centers. They're all listed at the end of the presentation. Because when we go to events, we tend to email about where we're going to be. We tend to spend more time at events than free or low cost. So when you go to those events, you're going to have your business card, maybe you'll have a brochure, but one document you should have on hand is your capability statement. That is essentially the 1 to 2 page document that describes what you do and why someone should care. It's like your business resume, but it is not exactly your resume. It's like your brochure, but it's not exactly your brochure. You're trying to make a 1-page statement that makes someone want to either forward that document on or inquire about you further. So you're going to provide all the information on that document that lets them do that. So obviously your contact information, your DUNS number, because if they're interested, they're going to look you up in SAM or look you up in the Dynamic Small Business Search Engine. your codes and certifications so that they know where exactly you are. But also things like your past performance, because past performance helps them understand where you are in actual landscape. So if you, let's say you do general construction, someone who does $5,000 jobs is not the same league as someone who does $1 million jobs. If I have a $10,000 job, I'm not going to bring it to the person who does $1 million jobs because they're not interested. But I might go to that person who does $5,000 jobs. There are plenty of people out there who make good money by just racking up small jobs that are in the discretion of the agency to assign to them. Facilities and equipment and expertise will depend on your industry. So if you're an accountant or you're an attorney or you're a marketing expert, you are your product. So your education is more important. Where you worked is important. Your years of experience will be important. Because that explains why someone should believe you. If you sell furniture, people don't really care where you went to graduate school or college. They care about your product lines, your delivery times. Where are you delivering to? If you do general construction, telling me that you have 20 years of general construction doesn't answer my question about what you do. Maybe you have experience building labs, and that's all you do. You're pretty much labs in hospitals. And only in New York City and Connecticut and Long Island. That makes sense. Maybe all you do is interior office renovations. So you change carpeting and you paint walls, and you only do that or maybe you do that all over New York State. That answers the question, what I can call you. When people say just general construction, unless you are a very large firm, or you truly have no specialty, which is very rare, it doesn't answer those questions. We want people to know exactly where they can go with those things. And what you do is you're developing something brand new that no one's seen before, but then we figure out a way to communicate that in that document so people who don't know your industry can feel comfortable knowing where to send that document next. Please proofread the capability statement, read your business cards, and your brochures. But one of the things that small businesses tend to have problems with, or if they do have any problems with, we'll come into this, they just don't have the bandwidth to do everything all the time as well as they would like. But just make sure any printed materials that you send off provide a viewer a sense that you've got it together. You understand what you're doing. Sometimes I see capability statements without a telephone number, without an email address, or where things are obviously misspelled. Well, if you're not dotting your own I's or crossing your own T's, you're not giving anybody else the impression that you're going to dot their I's or cross their T's later on. So you need to make sure you've got all your codes, your industry codes, your vendor numbers, etc. That's true up and down no matter which level of government you're trying to sell to. When you give someone a capability statement, they'll probably say, okay, thank you, but then you need to go to FedBiz office to see open opportunities. And that's totally fine. Just make sure you take their capabilities, you take their business card, and you email them a copy of your capability statement afterward. At a lot of these events, people are going to go from the event, say the event's over at 4:30, they'll leave the event and go home, and then they go back to the office the next day. The chances of your capability statement making it to their house and then back in the office the next day, you don't want to bet on that. So just make sure you email it from there. When you look at biz ops though, and that may not necessarily be a brush off, they might be generally telling you that that's the only place their agency puts information. And it's probably true. That's the only place federal agencies are required to put it. Download whatever packages are there. Don't just download the main sections. Look at the appendices or any modifications because those might provide additional information that will help you price your items or massage your proposal. Make sure you get copies of any drawings that might be relevant. It's really important that you read all the material. Read also the contract clauses. So let's say there is let's say they're going to negotiate based on, they're going to negotiate after you submit your proposal. They have to say that in their contract clause. Anything that will affect acquisition has to be written out there. And they can't include the clause later. So they have to at least write it in there. And they might just say CFAR 50.da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. Make sure you understand. And the reason I say that is sometimes people don't read what they're signing before they sign it. Or they don't read what they're responding to completely before they send in the package. We had a real situation where people said, and I knew this to be true, I felt bad for the fellow, called our office and said if the government agency was not paid. They had invoiced several times, and the agency just was not paying their bills as they needed to. And they were out $120-something thousand in agency work. We went back to the contract. It said very clearly, based on the clauses, that this was a flat acquisition. They were getting paid at the end. So they've been invoicing for intermediate steps along the way when they weren't entitled to payment according to the contract that they had signed. Now, it's a problem. That doesn't make it the agency's problem that somebody else didn't choose to read their contract. And then what then happens is that it makes your company look a little bit, you don't look too careful if you're invoicing an agency for work that they're not entitled to be paid for. Now, before they signed it, if they didn't want to go along with that, they could have negotiated with the agency, tried to get some intermediate payments going, but instead of, but that would have been a proactive way to go about it. The only way they would have known is if they actually read the contract, right? So just make sure you really completely understand what it is. Also, if there are any pre-bid meetings or pre-proposal meetings where the agency opens their doors and has people who will be evaluating the proposals or who will be involved in the acquisition sitting there to answer questions, go. Because you might miss information or miss questions that are going to be asked or information that's going to be provided in that meeting. Now, they won't purposefully try to hide information, but if they're in construction, you want to at least make sure you walk through the site to see if there's any questions you have. A real-life example of this is we have folks who get work in 26 Federal Plaza. And when you go through 26 Federal Plaza, you'll realize that you have to go through what feels like airport security, right? This fellow got the work, it was great. They skipped over their orientation. I don't really know how they managed to do that. And then they found themselves in a situation where they were trying to get into 26 Federal Plaza at the end of the workday so they didn't disturb their employees. Totally fine. The problem is, in order to bring men and materials into 26 Federal Plaza, you have to go past the security. In order to bring boxes or sealed containers, which, you know, cement and paint and all that kind of stuff, you've got to get it past the bumps and the dogs. The bumps and dogs go home at 3 o'clock. These were trying to make it at 6. So it was a constant, you know, for several days they had this back and forth about how they were going to get into the office. A walkthrough could have solved that. They would have realized that these access questions were an issue. The agency said, you should have known. You know, we didn't hide any of this information. Who were you sending to our office? If you didn't, they had to go through the security. Why didn't they find that out? You know, because it would affect them. I mean, in both of those cases I mentioned, the situation was resolved, but it took a lot of headache and a lot of hassle that probably could have been avoided if someone read all the materials and asked questions. You can always ask questions, and you can always say, you know, walk me through what else do I need to consider. The contracting officers aren't there to have any gotchas. They're there to get the thing done or the item acquired. I mentioned read everything. Certainly read what you're sending in. Request a procurement history. So certain things are always being required often. So if by virtue of there being a federal building, there's always been someone cleaning it, right? If you're bidding on a janitorial contract in a federal plaza or any federal building, you should find out why the person who had it before is no longer going to be doing it. Maybe that company is going out of business, the person's retired, they just want to recompete it because it was 5 years ago the last time around, they want to give somebody else a chance. Or maybe there was some kind of a conflict, and you can find out what that conflict was by just asking. And sometimes you'll find out that one person or the other was completely unreasonable. It's good to know before you walk in whether or not it's the person who's still in place that was the unreasonable party. Again, pre-bid meetings and walkthroughs are really important, even if you're not going to be a prime. If you're going to be a subcontractor, let's say you're a plumber and you know there's a big hospital going up, you still want to go to the pre-bid meeting because the chances are the person who's going to win that contract will be in that room, because it's very difficult to win a construction contract if you don't know anything about the site. You know, so you want to make sure you're developing your relationships there, because those are people who are proven winners. They're actually invested in this process. Also submit things on time. 12 o'clock is 12 o'clock is 12. If they ask for 5 copies and 1 original, it's 5 copies and 1 original. You don't submit all 5 copies and 1 original, you're not responsive. So if you're going to go through all the trouble of putting together a proposal, you want to give yourself the opportunity to have the proposal read. Because for any major omission, you could just be kicked out of contention completely, especially in time, because that's not a matter of opinion. The contracting officers want basically, aside from price, they want to make sure you're responsible and responsive. Responsible has a technical definition in federal acquisition regulations, but the boilerplate text basically means they need to know you have what it takes to get the job done. So do you have financial wherewithal? You know, nobody wants to start a construction project and see the folks just stop showing up because they're not getting paid. So they're going to look at your line of credit. They want to make sure you have manufacturing facilities if it's a manufacturing thing. If it's a cost-plus contract where you're reimbursed for your cost plus a percentage of profit, they need to make sure you know how to account for the cost elements that will go into their repayment. If you are doing anything that involves health or human safety, there are going to be a whole lot more questions because the government has a vested interest in making sure that those things go smoothly. A system for qualifying suppliers. Again, if it's health and human safety, we really are going to care, especially if there have been any recent snafus in their acquisition strategy. I mean, in some cases, buying American matters a lot. Make sure that you know whether or not that agency cares about that, or it applies to this acquisition. Responsiveness means that if they ask you 50 questions, you have to provide 50 answers, and they should know where to find the answer to all 50 questions. If you answer 47, or you make up other stuff, that's on you. Better to provide more than less, but you want to make sure you're answering their questions because they're not going to go through the effort of giving you the benefit of the doubt. That's not the contracting officer's job to do. They can't infer that you believe certain things if you left it out. Because when they sign the contract, they're signing a contract based on what you provided, and what they provided. Anything that's gray area or confused or missing is not something they have the luxury of being able to guess at. Okay, so another area, small businesses can sometimes have issues with, is you're doing a little bit of everything. And sometimes you're sales, and you're also research and development, and you're also accounting. And that's what makes small businesses so exciting. But the other thing is it opens you to risk. So you need to have a contingency plan in place, especially if you are your product. If you're an event planner and you catch pneumonia, the event still is taking place, whether or not you have pneumonia. Or if your child gets sick, or your spouse gets sick. The contracting officer isn't necessarily going to be difficult with you because they don't believe that you're human. So they still have a job to be done that they paid for. So you need to find contingency plans that allow for at least those obvious things. Like what happens if I can't be there that day? Who do I know and who do I trust who can step in and do this work for my company? Maybe it means partnering with a competitor. That just, if you're doing an event in December and you get snowed in your house, but there's no snow where that conference is taking place, you need to find someone who's going to be able to help you out. Then give yourself enough time to react. It's going to take you 10 days to deliver something, promise it in 14, 15, 20. Because your supplier is missing a deadline is not an excuse for you missing the federal government's deadline. You need to have multiple ways of getting around this. You're not responsible for acts of God or acts of war, but you're pretty much responsible for everything else. So your supplier being late, you're responsible for you being sick, or a child being sick. You're not responsible for floods or quarantines or delay, or all of the shipping. DHL and UPS and USPS are all grounding their planes. Of course, you can't ship your things where they need to go in time. But you don't want to put yourself in a position where you're getting a bad performance rating because you missed the deadline when you could have avoided it. So when it comes to getting paid, one, know what you're entitled to before you even sign up. Make sure you can afford to do that. Keep good records. Generally speaking, you won't have problems accepting electronic fund transfers. Most banks will take money from the government. If you sell something small, you might want to make sure you can accept government credit cards. Just call whoever processes your credit cards currently to make sure that's the case. I know for a fact we can't fill up our government cards at every gas station. Some gas stations don't take the card. So just double check that. Things to remember, obviously you have to keep yourself in mind of your customer. In private practice, people typically care about time, and they care about cost, and they care about quality. But in government, we care about time, cost, quality, and other things, like not being a headache, making sure you get the paperwork in on time, making sure that you can adhere to the contracts that you actually signed off on. Because the contracting officer is not the person who's paying you. They're the person who signed off on that contract. So a lot of times, like the fellow who wanted to accelerate the payments, The contracting officer wasn't in control of that. They had to go someplace else because the contracting officer wasn't the person who ran the acquisition, wasn't the person dispersing the funds, wasn't the person authorizing the disbursement of those funds. So there were a lot of other people involved. So make sure you get that. Also, entrepreneurs are inherently more comfortable with risk. You guys, if you think you can get it done in 10 days, you might promise it on day 11, or maybe even day 9 if you think you can get your guys to work late. That's not the way the government works. Government workers like me are, we're not risky people. So just make sure you understand that. If you think it's going to take 10 days, give yourself 14. Because I'm not going to start sweating until day 13, day 14, So just give yourself enough time to get that done. Also, understand that sometimes a mistake is not that big of a deal. Sometimes it is. If you're painting our storage room, I don't know why we're painting our storage room, but if we were, maybe, something's going to be delayed for a day or two, you contact the contracting officer as soon as you know. They may not care as long as it gets done by the end of the month, maybe. If you're painting the regional administrator's office, the presidential appointee, that had better be done on time, on quality. Make sure you understand what that contracting officer is facing. Because at the end of the day, no one wants to get yelled at for something not getting done on time. But they didn't even have any control of getting done on time, So make sure that you don't give people heartburn. So I mentioned that there are other places you can get support. Procurement Technical Assistance Centers are jointly funded by the Department of Defense and then I think the state in which they operate. And there's one at LaGuardia here. There's also the Small Business Development Centers. The agencies themselves have small business specialists or Office of Disadvantaged Small Business Specialists, small business utilization experts, but they always have small business in their title. I would recommend sticking with PTAX and the SBDCs. The other and SBA, obviously. Some of the other resources are just different depending on where you are. They might have different coverage areas. And I will email this presentation to you all so you have a copy of it and you also can research links yourself. SBA's website is really helpful on government contracting issues. Like literally, it's sba.gov. You hit the contracting tab, and a lot of material will come up, including trainings that you can take. And my email address is here. If for some reason you don't get this presentation from me, I could have just written your email address down wrong or emailed it incorrectly.